Good. Hey, look, well, I will get going. We do have a lot of things to get through. So I'm going to apologize in advance for basically going through things relatively quickly and talking quite quickly. It's not ideally how I would do this, but I also know how valuable your time is, and that like any one of these things, there are things that you will already know, there are things that will be of value, and there are things that just what won't be as relevant for you, because I really want to make sure that you actually get something out of this. I've been to a number of sessions, even in this emerging kind of field, and some of it just doesn't seem particularly practical, which is kind of where this has come from. So I'm just going to make sure I'm doing this right. So I'm going to start on AI in very general thoughts, and then I'm going to talk about observations and thoughts that are relevant to senior leaders, and some few other thoughts there on in the background. Again, I would love to continue this conversation with all of you. I would love to continue supporting you however you can, and I'll also be very interested in your thoughts around this as well, because the reality is there is no silver bullet. Anyone who thinks that they know everything about AI, and everyone who thinks that they know everything about how that pertains to leadership and change in educational organisations is full of it, because it doesn't exist. It's such an emerging field at the moment. Look, very quickly, I work at New Era Technology, and look, I've worked with schools for over 20 years, and in schools, the idea is being that one of the things that I can do and New Era can do is to help support you and navigate in this space in a variety of ways. And I am required to say, if you would like to add me on LinkedIn, please do so, as prevalent as I am. Right. So here we go. So one of the big things that came up around AI is data and privacy, right? And there's actually a development that's happened in the last 12 hours around that, which I'll get to a little bit later. But I just wanted to show you an example, depending on how much experience you've had with AI engines. This is a recorded screenshot of me putting in that heading, and you'll see it hopefully start to play here, around privacy and data protection considerations in AI for New Zealand school leaders, right? So there we go. It corrected my spelling for me, which is great. It's really good at picking up terrible spellers like me. It gave me an outline of it here, and literally it came up with it as quickly as you are seeing it here. It took me, being a human being, a little while to remember to hit the continue button. In the meantime, you'll see a purple bar there in the top, which is it's working on in the background to actually put this presentation together, and away it goes. So here it goes. This is on gamma.app. If you hadn't had a go with it before, it's pretty incredible, and starts putting this information together here. Now, I've got to say, everything in this presentation that I put together literally this quickly, there's nothing actually wrong with it. There's nothing that's like terrible or completely off mark. However, there are things that it doesn't have a lot of depth to. It's pretty much an overview of things, but a pretty good place to start. And as you can kind of see through here, it has even scraped some of the information that is relevant to New Zealand, including things like the Privacy Act, and including the Education Act as well, which is pretty interesting. I do want to be clear though, however, that these are places to start with, and again, AI, although it has been around for some time, is still within its infancy of how it's kind of doing things. If you don't know, this was another one I recorded some time ago. This was at a talk I did in Wellington a couple of weeks ago, around what ChatGPT is. I don't know where the graphics had gone at this stage, but essentially, ChatGPT in itself is one of the AI platforms, and there's a lot of them out there. And AI itself isn't new. However, in the last couple of years, particularly, the investment in it has been significant to give it the complexity that allows it to be a much more general populace facing, right? So there's ChatGPT, which is powered by OpenAI. There's Google Bard, and you'll see over there on the screen on your right that it does have disclaimers around it. It's Google, but it doesn't necessarily think it's going to get everything right. It starts to generate responses. I had a friend of mine who was a healthcare practitioner ask a question around some protocols to do with a particular incident, and it was kind of not quite up to date. But interestingly enough, you could go in and correct it, and it would say, thank you very much. And I will take that on board for the next blah, 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 and reiterate it. There's also things like Perplexity. There's lots of stuff out there. And what I'd really encourage you to be doing in that space is to have a go. So one of the most obvious ones is obviously ChatGPT 3 and 4, or 3.5 and 4. 3.5 is free, 4 is I think $20 US a month. And essentially it allows you to have a little bit of a play with it. And I will give you an update around, a very interesting update around ChatGPT soon. The difference being with the ChatGPT 4, it allows you to do some things you can't do in the other one. You can have some plugins, for instance, and connections. You'll see there with that arrow as I was showing there, that you can actually upload files as well. So you can actually take a file, upload a PDF. I did it with some school business managers on Friday, took a job description, uploaded it there, got it to rewrite it, put a table in, and got it to do it, actually to rewrite it in terms where English might be a second language, for instance, to make those things a little bit easier to understand. The other big power is the connections, the plugin stores, everything from Expedia through to whatever it is that you want generally. And I think that this is one of the things that's an indicator of how things are going to be for the future. One of the aspects that's going to happen with AI, and again, this is becoming more prevalent lately, is that it's going to become something that's working in the background rather than something that you're going to go into and use per se. It's going to become connected as a driver, as a machine in the back of what you've already got there. For example, here you can use now some AM plugin stuff that allows you to write a book if you want to and rewrite it like a human writer. I'm going to get into some of the guts now of the relevance for education and in school leadership. One of the things that's come up is around assessment itself and how that could work. There is a bulletin that came out from the Ministry of Education, I think last Thursday or Friday, can't quite remember, losing track of time, maybe Wednesday. And it's something that, and talking to the ministry directly about them, they're not going to be the be all and end all around knowing how everything works. I know that will shock some of you, but they're, like everyone, they're playing a bit of catch up around this as well. And it's going to take a lot of collegiality and navigation to share what people are doing, and that's going to have to be ongoing. But one of the things that's come out around assessment is signposting, and the reason that I put the primary school lessons around that is something that really has emerged is that in this time of using summative assessments, for instance, and having to control that environment about how that is done in the face of AI, really signposting around progression, how people are working towards an assessment outcome, is becoming more and more important potentially, depending on the subject area and how that is done. Now, that's the same in the primary school setting, which I think is done particularly well. As they move towards assessing curriculum levels. Good primary school teachers, of course, are often signposting along the way and taking some of that information. I think the other bit that's going to come out around this is around micro-credentialing. That being able to take those bits of assessment or judgments along the way and use them towards that kind of whole is going to become more and more important. And the other part is asking the right questions. And I've put a really weird phrase there that I made up called post-assessment assessment, which is, again, once an assessment is done or that activity is completed, is actually qualifying that response in one way or another, actually asking the question to go, okay, so explain to me what it is that you've got here. And I think that human element is going to become really important around there. This will have impact upon assessment conditions, I don't doubt about it. There was a ministry panel not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching, or a panel, and there was a whole plethora of perspectives around it. Some people saying it's now the death of the essay. There will be no summative assessments anymore. We will need to look at things formatively in a different way. Look, I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation around it. But the question fundamentally, as well as, does this really matter? And I think that that's going to be something we're going to have to grapple with some time. There are many paths to the top of the mountain, but one moon to see. Does it matter how they're getting there? What is it about the authenticity? What is it that we're really wanting them to grasp along the way? So I think that's going to become very, very important. And I just wanted to reiterate this. I put in there undetectable. So if you're thinking, well, where we're driving from is we want to check that your stuff is not AI generated, good luck. The experts will agree with me. There are, as much as you can get Grammarly now, as much as you can get something to write it for you, there are plans and pricing around putting your stuff in there for it to become undetectable with a money back guarantee. So that's probably, I would argue, not the place to approach it from. Sure, checks and balances, absolutely. We'll talk about transparency and conversation, but probably not the place to start from. The other part, of course, is curriculum. What are we teaching? We need to be thinking about what is it currently that humans can do that AI cannot, because I think that is going to become incredibly relevant when we are looking at our curriculum. Emergent properties, if you don't know, is tied up with AI actually teaching itself things that it doesn't already know. We've seen now AI being able to learn languages that were irrelevant but important in the context of the questions that's being asked, to go away and learn different languages and different vernaculars even that are relevant to how it's responding. So thinking about what that means in terms of what it is as humans we can still do, and you'll see the bit of a tongue-in-cheek there around, hey, ChatGPT, finish this building, but that also has a question around it in time. Also, what are the tangible skills that are going to be useful in coming years? So those of you who have a science background, for instance, will realize that in mapping proteins, as an example, it takes about a whole PhD to map one protein, takes about 5 years, whereas some of these new AI models, and one in particular using a supercomputer, managed to map 200 million proteins in 6 days. So there are things here where we need to be thinking about it. Where is our place and what is it that we're teaching that is going to be relevant? And I would signal one thing around this from the conversations I've had with lots of people, is that at the moment in your communities, and whether that is primary or secondary school, start talking to the parents and your community about how AI is impacting their workforce or their communities. What is it that is changing in terms of the expectations and the skills that are there? There are proponents on the whole spectrum saying you're not going to get employed unless you've got AI skills and an understanding of it, through going to bury my head in the sand, this doesn't matter. I think actually hearing back from them, how it's affecting them as employers and employees, I think is very relevant to how we should be looking at what it is that we do within our curriculum sphere. Now, here's some musings from me. If I were you as a senior leader, if I transport myself back to the good old days working alongside legends like Tom Webb, what I would do if I was a senior leader in a school. The very first thing I would do is I would go and have a play with some AI technology and do a couple of courses. I'd probably set up a dummy email address. I have an email address that is completely irrelevant to anything else that I use to put in as my username and password, and have a play with some of those AI courses. There are a couple of significant ones. There's many that are available, but this is one that's put out by Microsoft and LinkedIn. And I'll share this with you all afterwards. You can, we'll put a place where you can get this presentation and this recording. And it's around generative AI, so you could do that. There's also a Google one around some training and resources, and just have a play with some stuff. You might find it useful yourself, but it starts to demystify some of it, but also gets your collective thinking around how it could be used potentially in your setting. The other bit I would check, and if you haven't done this before, is I would just chuck your school email address into Have I Been Pwned? This is basically a website where you can tell if your email address has been and password has been compromised in a data breach. So you might have signed up for LinkedIn or for Adobe or for whatever, and you might not have changed your password or something within that time. I think that this is a security thing that we all need to be a little bit careful of, because if at this stage any of that information gets owned, it could be a real problem. So I'd do that as well. And then I would be starting to look at policy and including wording that specifically referred to the use of AI in assessment and the delivery of curriculum in any one of those contexts. I think we need to be really explicit about it. If at one end of the spectrum that you don't condone the use of AI in any part of an assessment process, be explicit about it. If it's something that you don't want students using at home, if they're in primary school or whatever it is, or be explicit about it. There is no right or wrong here at the moment, but be aware that when young people, as we know, are sharing some of their information, and even staff in an AI platform, at the moment, that can become relatively public data and can actually be used to shape how it's being used. And when that comes to some of the issues around things like identity, we need to be pretty explicit about how we're doing it. And so I would encourage having that conversation with staff as well around how they're using AI and what is a kind of appropriate use of it using school information. Like, we don't want to be uploading anything that's identifiable in terms of students or anything else specifically within the school, because it's the worst nightmare, isn't it? Having to go out and report a mandatory data breach and knowing where that information is actually sitting as well. So I would be encouraging a conversation about that. And I'd be transparent. I'd be really transparent that this is a journey that we're all on. This is how we're using the tools at the moment. This is how we want to, that things are going to change. They change at the moment, it seems, every day in terms of some of this stuff. There literally are proponents of AI out there originally that are now saying stop and slow down. We need to be very careful about how we're using it. And if you think at the moment, some of the identity issues that come for our young people in terms of people impersonating other people, horrible things like grooming and that kind of stuff, imagine that exponentially going crazy when you've got an AI and a bot in the background that is not only putting these personas out there, but actually they're interacting with these personas without needing anyone to touch them, and actually sort of evolving and adjusting as those conversations are going on. Not to mention things like, being able to imitate people's voices and faces and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty scary. So I think having that conversation and being transparent about where you're at is really important as well. And I'd check some basic network protocol stuff. And I say this from the bottom of my heart: if you do not have two-factor or multi-factor authentication in your school for a staff, that should be the first thing that you do tomorrow. It is just so important to stop people getting in there, looking at complexities, who's actually looking after those super admins, and ongoing training around this stuff. It's going to change cyber crime and security in that digital space. Look, we do earthquake drills, we do lockdown drills. Digital safety drills, like, as far as I'm concerned, should be as important as anything else, because they're probably the thing that's most likely to happen. Hopefully none of them. And I'd also start the conversation about what this means, as I said before, around pathways and career options. I said to Dad I was doing a talk on artificial intelligence a couple of weeks ago, and he was a school principal, and he said, I think I worked most of my career with people with artificial intelligence, but I'll take that for what it is. But look, I think it does have an effect on it, and again would encourage having that conversations with careers, with those people out in that community of employers. And it's interesting to see how things are coming out in the tertiary at the moment. Some of them are saying, cool, you can use AI for whatever you want. Think of it like a mentor, think of it like a tutor. They can help you all along the way, but they cannot do the assessment for you. And I know some schools have adopted that approach as well. And the other bit I would do is I would start setting up a course in AI, or at least a club, or something about how it's used. I think that this is, we underutilize our young people, and I realize that may be more accessible within the secondary school context, but it may be that there's ways of doing that in the primary school context as well, as a way of getting them to highlight what are people talking about. I mean, we found it with social media, didn't we? I mean, at the moment, we play this constant catch up to what's happening in social media, what's happening in that digital sphere of relationships. And it's really hard to keep up with it all, but they know. They knew Facebook was, basically an old people's platform well before I did, and then it was TikTok or whatever else it is. And I think the same is going to come with AI. They're going to know kind of what's going on and how it's being used, and actually getting their buy-in to be educated around that and look at potential issues and threats and using them as a platform to do that, because most kids are pretty well intended around all that stuff. The other bit I would do is I would start getting some AI benchmarks. We've done it with moderation for a long time. We've done it in primary schools when we're looking at what would we expect someone to be working at in level 2, level 3, calibrating that around each one of our subject areas and curriculum areas. I'd start doing that because, it does get pretty smart. It can start to manipulate vernacular around a number of things as well. So putting that in the ground, I think even assessments, if you're doing it at a basic level, being able to put the assessment question in and see what it comes up with as a bit of a benchmark, I think would be really, really useful. And in terms of cohort, if all of a sudden little Tom in his class produces this incredible expository essay on unicorns and Orwellian 1984, as opposed to he was writing with crayon 3 weeks ago. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I think that there will be a bit of a blurred ground around some of that stuff. So putting down some benchmarks around that, being again transparent with staff, get it up there on the projector, get it up there on the screen, type in some things, get them to talk about how we could be aware of what these things look like in terms of what we're expecting to see. Look, in terms of leadership decision, big stuff, I think we do need to take a look at the key competencies and what lens. I haven't gone down this road yet. I started to go down it with a colleague of mine and it ended up huge, and it will be something I will be doing. But looking at what does AI mean in terms of our key competencies, do they hold true and are they relevant? I really, really want them to be, because I think that, it's an axis for us outside of the knowledge stuff and synthesis stuff. I think that we do need to embrace parts of it, though. It is an incredible tool to enrich learning. If you haven't had a play, and I did this not long ago. I said, can you explain ionic bonding, but do it in the form of a fairy tale? It will tell you a story about, whatever it is, and do it in the form of ionic bonding. Is it a way of being able to explain things in a different way? You can put in, say, explain this to me like I'm 7 years old, explain this to me like whatever it is, put this in a table, put this in bullet points so I understand. I actually naughtily uploaded a Ministry of Education bulletin into ChatGPT and said, can you summarize this for me in 3 paragraphs or less? And it was great. So it kind of took some of the effort, and I've actually done it with policy as well, and see what are the key elements I kind of need to get out of this. So you can do some of that stuff. The power is also going to come in data analysis, and I'm going to speak about that in just a second with the developments that have happened in the last sort of 12 and 24 hours. But I think that's going to be huge. I'm very excited about that from a perspective where we can take our own data around our individual schools, and ideally there was enough synthesis with Kahuiako to be able to take it in there, or even the entire country ideally, and get it to start doing some analysis around what outcomes are we expecting, what interventions can we have that will make a difference and change that trajectory for our young people. That's a link there to the AI dilemma. If you've got an hour and you're feeling waxing lyrical about AI, I would encourage you to watch that. It's a pretty interesting watch around what this space kind of means as human beings. I also believe that we need to have a mechanism for review in place of this stuff. It is going to evolve very quickly. Putting a policy down now could look completely different in 3 to 6 months. And the last bit I've got there is around the Kia syndrome, and the Kia syndrome is something I talk about a lot, which is shiny objects making technology and shiny objects distracting us from what's really key in terms of what we all know and have probably known since the dawn of time, what good education is. And I think that losing sight of strong relationships, knowing your students, empathy with your community, AI and all of that, hopefully as human beings is never going to replace it. And I certainly know that in the terms of, if we look at the other paradigm shift that's happened, which is of course social media and that digital world of our young people, we know that at the end of the day, and we see it, them coming back and craving those, personal relationships, and what makes us human is really important as well. I'll give you an example around the other thing that I think we should be doing, which is including AI as part of our decision making. If you're looking at things like technologies, you're looking at software packages, you're looking at things for the future, put a bit of a lens over them and think about how AI could influence them in the future. And an example of this is around, and I'm sure it's none of your schools where you have kids that vape at all, but vaping sensors and cameras. So at the moment, you can put a vape sensor up and you put cameras around the school, but the smarts really are now not around that technology. It's around the AI stuff. So there are platforms now where it will detect a vape, it will see a camera, it will facially detect the student called person of interest in this particular platform we deal with, and it will start to build a pattern around it, and it will alert you and say, this person, every time this vape sensor goes off within this range of time, we're seeing their face. So there are things to take into consideration without being Big Brother, but using the smarts of AI in a way that helps you in your decision making as a leader. This is the big change in the last 12 to 24 hours, because one of the questions I get asked all the time was, well, that's all very well and good, but what do I do if I want to use this within my school and I don't want my data to be potentially exposed into the public arena? Now, this is brand new. It's just come out. Literally, which is the enterprise version from privacy at OpenAI. Now, I've requested pricing on it, so if you ask me how much it costs, I don't know yet, because it just basically has a button that says, can you contact salespeople. Now, this is really interesting because this allows you to be able to take, as an example, your school data, sign up your company, enterprise, school to it, and any input you put in and the output that it generates is within a bubble, right? It is yours, and it cannot be exposed, and it will not be exposed in terms of AI will not learn itself off your own stuff. It will learn it within that context, and that's a stupid way to explain it, but it's kind of the most simple. What it means is you now have access to your own AI bubble. And additionally to that, and you can go down this rabbit hole yourself, there are things called APIs, which is kind of integrations. You can pay extra for those. You can use them in there. You will see stuff coming, because you've got to remember, they've spent billions on developing this stuff, and somehow they're going to have to get their money back. The other bit is things like Copilot and Microsoft. So pretty soon, you could pay X amount to have Copilot, which is basically AI integrated into your Microsoft 365, things like Word. Rather than go and try and work it out yourself, you can type it in there and say, okay, look, can you change the font here, and can you level this up, or can you make suggestions how this could be rewritten, or provide references for what it is that I've said here. So some pretty big stuff happening, and that is a huge one that's happened in the last sort of 12 hours around having an enterprise account for OpenAI. So I'm fascinated. So let me know if you sign up, because I'm keen as to see it. Very quickly, a few prompts that you might want to have a go at. Again, I will share this through AIO for Work. The reason AIforwork.co. The reason that I put this here is that most people, when they start playing with AI and particularly ChatGPT, they throw in a prompt that's 2 sentences long or 1 sentence is long. That's kind of, if you want a real prompt, that's about how long they are. The reason is they can do way more than you think. They can self-evaluate. This AI4work.co is fascinating to go into. You can paste that prompt into ChatGPT. It will ask you questions. You will answer them. It will then it will produce you something. It will then ask you if you want to review it. It will evaluate its own work. So just have a look at that as a really interesting play. Love Teach Anything. It's kind of really cool about how to explain things. It uses that power in the background, but in a quite a sequential way. Fun one to play with teachers. CurryPod again. I'll leave it at that, but a nice little one to start looking at generating lessons as well. If you're an artistic person, you can Scribble Diffusion is kind of cool. You can put in a scribble and it can start to refine that image using AI. It's a good one for those visually. Teachmate AI is kind of cool as well, and some tools for teachers again. Nice one to have a play with. I love this one. I love Question Well, about asking questions differently in a different way, and being able to use that as well. Jasper for your admin staff. Jasper, if you didn't know, also has an AI policy template for you to be able to adopt. You can download that. There's a few of them floating out there as well, but a really good one for admin staff as well and your support staff to be able to do some of the functions they haven't had before. I'm almost finished, I promise. I know I've gone slightly over time and I'm talking like a mad person, but I'm trying to get things through and not waste your time as well. Things I would be thinking about and I think about are automations and workflows. Getting things to be a lot more automated. As I said, Copilot before with Microsoft is coming out, but anyone who's into coding, anyone who's into that kind of stuff, this is there and evolving by the minute around your ability to be able to create workflows and not have to do it yourself. I don't know how much people are into quantum computing, but it is at its infancy, but it is around. And this is serious computing power. I would think we need to be thinking about AI and quantum computing and the next point, robotics. I mean, I don't know how much you believe in Skynet and Terminator, but at the moment, AI is very much a platform that is digitally online. Generally speaking, there are functions that do manifest into machines and how they work, but we're not there yet. But we do need to be thinking about it, and we need to be thinking about the ethics of it. We start talking about AI like it's a person. We personify it. We say, oh yes. I mean, my dad, bless him, you know, I got him to have a go on it, and he's like, would you please, and thank you, you know, after it's done. So we're starting to look at it as a person, and that can actually, if you think about outside of ChatGPT and the other things that are going, if AI is generating in the background, it's going to start really personifying itself, and we're gonna get into that place where things are generated for us to click on, and at the end of the day, we are products. Look, these things are massive to me. I think, you know, if you go and cook some kai for someone, if you go and write a poem for someone, that time is respect. The point I really want to make around this is for those of you who remember when computers first kind of came in and they were a lot more accessible, we were all like, oh, they're going to do all this stuff for us. It's going to make our lives great. They're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. But I don't know about you, but I don't feel any less busy since the internet and computers. I feel worse. So I'm just wondering what this means, and that maybe we need to look at things like our connections and our whakapapa, and what does it really mean for us? What are we creating this time for? What does that mean for your school? Again, do we go back to the Kia syndrome just because it's amazing and all out there? Do we adopt it at high speed? Are we responding to the community because they're like, well, what are you doing around AI? You know, why are you not using it and stuff? It's like, well, I want to have thought about that and have a considered response. Look, new era model, aren't we great? It's lovely to see so many people on the call today who work with us. This is the kind of thing that we do alongside the other stuff. So if you do want to talk to us, look, hopefully you've all got my email address floating around there, bits and pieces. If anyone had any questions and still had time, they didn't need to rush away for anyone else, I'd love to open it up and we can have a discussion. Otherwise, I will say thank you for your time. And hopefully you got something out of it that's worth considering, or maybe something that you didn't know, or yeah, it just wasn't a waste of 35 minutes. Anyone. No, that's all right. I will. Look, if you want to get hold of me, you can email me. I think you've got my email address is in there anyway, but I'm pretty easy to get hold of. But look, welcome the questions, welcome feedback, welcome. Make it an hour long. You were talking too fast. Whatever. I don't care. I'm pretty resilient after having worked with Tom for some time, so that's the way it goes. But other than that, have a lovely, lovely rest of your day and evening.